All right, today is Thursday, January 21st, 2021, and this is our weekly developer check-in meeting. We have a couple of items on the agenda today. Before we get to that, let's go through and start introductions. My name is Jen Lampton, joining from Oakland, California. I'm super excited about the 1.18 release last week, so thank you everybody for your fantastic work on that. Let's turn it over to Tim.
Hi, I'm Tim Erickson, St. Paul Tim, coming to you from Deerwood, Minnesota this week. No exciting updates. Excited about the release and excited to start thinking about what feature I'm going to advocate for next cycle. Joseph.
Hi, I'm Joseph. I'm from Las Vegas, Nevada. And I don't know. I haven't really done much the last 2 weeks, but hopefully this week I can finish the cache tag stuff. So, yeah. Luke?
Hi, I'm Luke McCormick, San Ramon, California. I dived in and did a bunch of things right at the end related to 118, and it was a interesting experience. I'm enthusiastic to kind of pick up the momentum and do things like that into the future. Peter?
Hi, Peter from Australia. Yeah, I've been doing lots of stuff in Backdrop lately, all different things, but I'm particularly interested in talking about some documentation proposals later. So, yeah. Phil or someone hasn't gone?
If I can get unmuted here. Hey, Phil Ward out of Wichita, Kansas. I don't have anything specific to bring up, but maybe when we get down to the telemetry area, then I've got some thoughts on that. So let's go. Have you gone yet, Jen?
I haven't yet. So I'm Nate Lampton. I'm from Oakland, California. And yeah, excited about the 118 release. That's out and in the wild now. Very exciting. Lots of sites have already been moving onto it. Let's see. And yeah, I'm excited about the possibilities for the next version, right? It's time for blue sky. We always love this part of part of the release planning. And yeah, I'm happy to get into that later. And I think last up is Justin.
I'm Justin Christopherson. I'm in Denver, Colorado, and I help out with infrastructure, server things from time to time. Is that everybody?
I think so.
Yep.
Jen, you're muted.
Okay, so I unmuted and muted opposite. Sorry, everyone. Last week we had 4 new contributed modules provided: link checker, web form localization, slider field, and grid field formatter. Grid field formatter was released on the 14th, so I don't remember if we talked about that during our last week or not. But thank you everybody for working on Contrib. It's exciting. I'm going to turn it over to Nate to talk about Backdrop 118.
Yeah, so Backdrop 118 came out 6 days ago on Friday of last week, January 15th. So kind of as always, like on time release, we again had no problems with getting the release out as scheduled. I might say this every single release, but I love our release cadence, like the regularly scheduledness of it, the predictability of it. And we stuck to it once again here for this latest release. Feature freeze went really well with things. The things that got in and the things that didn't, but we had a very minimal number of changes between feature freeze and the actual release. So far from what I've seen in the issue queue, we also haven't seen any regressions with the new features that were introduced. So yeah, we're looking really good. There is an excellent blog post on backdropcms.org. The Backdrop 118 released is the title of it. You can just Google it or see it on the Backdrop homepage. And thanks again to Luke, who is here in this meeting, for authoring that post, and Tim for taking several of the screenshots. The whole blog post is super great and comprehensive of all of the new functionality that got added to 118. So I don't have more to say about 118 other than maybe let's take a second and be happy about that. So yay, thank you. We made 118, it's out there. Thank you to all of our contributors who continue to make Backdrop an excellent piece of software, and all of those here who have been critical in the release and most every release of Backdrop to date. So let's see, 118.1 is the next bug fix version of 118 that will be coming out. We posted a security announcement earlier today about 118.1 saying that its release is going to be happening very soon. It's not this week, but Wednesday, the 27th of January, we are scheduling the release of 118.1, which is roughly in line with our pattern of making a new minor version and then waiting 2 weeks and then releasing a bug fix version that addresses any regressions or anything that we found over that, like after the release. The reason for the scheduling, though, and the reason why it's a security release is because the pair archive tar library, which is a library that Backdrop core bundles, had a security release earlier this week. And Drupal also released a security release yesterday. And so we're intentionally postponing the security release slightly to make it line up with our normal cadence of waiting 2 weeks after a minor version. Also, releasing a security update right after a new minor version comes out can cause people to panic because they're like, oh, I don't have time to test things. And the security risk of our assessment of the security risk is fairly low. So Backdrop core doesn't even use the tar gzip library for any purpose other than installing modules. So unless you're allowing people to install modules, your site is largely less likely to have any kind of issue with the security update.
That include installer module or just the like user interface for uploading?
Just the user interface for uploading, because ironically, maybe not ironically, but Backdrop core, like our distribution system is entirely built upon zip files, not tar gz files. And so our use of the entire tar gz library is much less than that of Drupal. So yeah, in a way, I kind of wish that we could just say, you know, let's turn that library off, because it's now caused us what, like 2-3 security issues over the life of Backdrop, 2 of which have been in the last like 4 months. Like, yeah, so the tar.gz files just have a lot more complexity than zip files do in the end, because they manage things like symlinks and permissions, and zip files just don't deal with those things. And so zip files are also handled by PHP natively, and gzip files have to have this external library. So anyway, 118.1 will be coming out next week. And we also have 7 RTBC issues, all of which are fairly minor items that right now we've only merged in one other fix into 118.1. And we'll probably get in all of these RTBC issues and bundle them into the 118.1 release as well. Okay. Do you guys have any questions or comments on 118.1 or the security release or anything like that?
I do. So there are 7 RTBC issues. I didn't know if those should go into 118.1 with a security release next week, or if you wanted to hold off of those until whatever release comes after that. So I left them in the 118 milestone, but probably should kick that to core committers to make that decision.
Yeah, in most cases, we don't hold off on fixes for security releases. Like none of our security releases intentionally have been security only, because frequently we'll have a whole queue of fixes and then a security release needs to happen imminently because of some reason or another. And so the whole queue gets pushed out all at the same time with the security release. So we have never had a policy of making security releases that only include the security fix solely. So these other items here as long as all of them are low risk and they've been adequately tested, then they will all be moved in and released as well. Is that all clear? Okay. Okay. 118.2, 118.2, which I know is a little bit silly that we're now talking about the next bug fix release, but these are the issues that basically got carried over from the 117.5 release, I think it was. And these are issues that are not eminently ready to be merged in, but are ones that we'd like to bring up as to put a focus on them. So the site getting stuck in maintenance mode has been a bit of an issue for a while if you use the installer module, or sorry, if you use the update functionality, which is from installer module, the site gets stuck in maintenance mode while updating modules and you need to turn it back off manually. There is an issue there that is in needs review. Gregory has volunteered to review it. It's been a while though that this issue has been open and it just needs some eyeballs reviewing to make sure that works as expected. Let's see, next up, PHP notices when installing modules that have submodules. I haven't had an opportunity to look at this one yet, so the issue number is 4640. Oh, this one got fixed. So we'll take this one off the list. That's in 117.5. Oh, I should also make a quick note saying that 117.5 also came out at the same time as 118.0, and 118.0 obviously includes all of the fixes from 117.5. But it had a huge number of fixes in it. Jen, do you remember how many items there were in 117.5? It was like, maybe we should take a look. Yeah, I want to say that, hang on, I'm going to get the actual number here. 117.5. Only 34. Okay, I'm glad that I checked. So the 34 issues that were resolved in 117.5 as well, that also came out just last week. Okay, next up is this issue throwing a warning if the max input vars variable, PHP variable, is not set high enough, issue 3824. Currently still not getting a whole lot of updates here recently. Oh, it looks like well, maybe Jen or Peter, you guys have been looking at this more recently. Can you give us an update on this? No.
Sorry. So I think that issue is fine as it is, but right now on the like after, for example, on the permissions page, after you submit the form, it throws multiple errors because the error gets generated on the process part of the form. And in the process part of the form, there's no actual element that we can use to determine whether the form has been submitted yet or not. So the only way to like remove messages from messages is to pull them all and like search for specific strings. And so I got a little bit nervous about how to alter the messages in that case. So I don't know, I would like a core committer review on that to make sure the process of altering messages and backed up set messages is kosher in that scenario.
Okay. Let's see. And then last up on the list that we have on the agenda is language names not translated into their native names, issue 4511. And this one is has a pull request that needs review. Relatively simple change in that one as well. From the end user perspective, quite simple. But those are all the items that we have pulled out for 118.2. Largely because we've been clearing out so many that had been in the 117.5 list previously. I think it would be a good opportunity maybe in this next week for us to go through these ones that we have remaining, because some of these we've been mentioning for months, pull in some new ones that we think are of high priority, I notice like one of the ones that I'm looking through the list here that are tagged 118.2, and Joseph has an issue like making sure backdrop works in PHP 8, which will be important in the near future. Any other items that we think we should start bringing up on or giving some attention to, we should move into our agenda for weekly discussion.
So Nate, just to clarify, if anybody has a bug fix does it have to have been milestoned already, or how do we pick these issues for the bug fix release?
Yeah, so preferably it's something that's been milestoned already. So something that's in the 118.2 milestone. So the normal process for that is someone tags it with milestone candidate, and then a second person says that they agree, and then they add the milestone to the issue. And anybody can actually, anybody that has membership to the Backdrop Issues repository, which is, we try to be inclusive of absolutely everybody that contributes, add them to that group. Anybody can add the milestone, but the process of following the tag and then getting a second on it is the process that we usually use to get in that list.
Right.
Yeah, sorry, Jen, that's not for you. I know you know that. But then these other ones, what I would say to bring them up is that you can either post in Zulip before the meetings, like in the weekly meetings channel, like if you want to have something added to the agenda, or if you have permission to view the agendas or edit the agendas, then add it to the bottom of the agenda, or even just like right in the section if it's something that's of interest to you.
Okay. I think one of the reasons the list is a little shorter now is that I think I went through and deleted a couple from that were just hadn't been updated in like 2 or 3 months.
Yeah.
And I just took them off that list, and they can be added back if they make any progress. But
Makes sense. Thank you.
Yep. We also have in the agendas folder that's on Google Drive, we have a template that is used. So not sometimes there isn't a agenda yet for the next week, but you can put it into the agenda, and we copy the agenda before each meeting to make the next meeting notes. So putting it in the template is also completely acceptable.
Preferred, actually, somebody won't forget.
excellent.
Okay. Do you guys have any other issues you guys would like to bring up as like bug fixes that you think are important?
There was a new one that Peter and Gregor and I were working on that we weren't sure if it was going to be able to get in as a bug fix or not. Was it the remove? I can't find it. It's fine. Might be in 118.1.
All right. We'll move on.
Sure.
Okay, so 119. 119, wow, we're really moving up in the numbers. So 119 will be May 15th, 2021 with feature freeze on May 1st. Subject to change as we approach that date. But the only items that we have in the 119 milestone right now are items that got carried over from 118. And so that includes the exposed file name filter for the media library dialog issue 3293. Lauren is the advocate for this. I don't think that there's been progress other than we were trying to see if we could get it in for 118, but there were just some technical challenges that we have yet to sort out. That there's some real problems like that we need to figure out that are kind of hard in that issue. So issue 3293 currently still needs work. Let's see, advanced caching, support for cache tags, and the cache max age header, issue 4127. Joseph, you mentioned at the beginning of the meeting that you hadn't been working much over the past couple of weeks, but can you give us a status update on just where that is sitting?
Sure. I think it's mostly done. I do have a pull request up on that issue. if people want to go look at the changes so far, there are some issues I've been dealing with. Some bugs involving how it determines if something should be cached or not cached based on the tags that I just haven't had time to work through those yet, but there should be minor.
Well, that's great. Thanks for filing the pull request. I didn't realize that there was code up there now. That'll provide an opportunity to get some initial feedback on the overall approach.
Right. So yeah. So tests are currently failing because of those issues. And once I get it so that it's actually like has the correct settings, because the class itself actually has quite a lot of settings that it uses to handle different things. So yeah, just once I get those fixed, it should be working.
Great. And next up, Jen, you have this issue 4728. A field has value visibility condition for blocks.
Oh yeah. I haven't made any progress on that one.
Okay. And I see Tim putting in this issue, which was super close for 118. Add support for relationships to layout contexts. What's the issue number on that one, Tim?
I'm just adding it 2134, and that Doc Wilmot is advocating for it, so it should have been on the list. I don't think it ever got into the agenda for some reason, but it should be.
Yeah, so let's see. Last we checked on this before release. It was on Feature Freeze Day, actually, that we were trying to get the last items finished. The functionality works completely. It seems to be doing exactly what we expect. I think probably the biggest holdup that I had here last time I did a code review was that the terminology, of course it's terminology, right, on things needed to be improved slightly, that it was saying things like user from node, and that's really ambiguous. That what it's really talking about is the author of the node. And so just coming up with terminology there for those labels and the associated class name as well should be aligned. That was the only feedback that I had on that one. Now that we have more time, I also have a feeling that we might raise some questions about like just the general user interface. Like now there's a lot of additional items. When you add a context, that there's a new link that says add contextual or add context relationship, which is a bit wordy, but I shouldn't complain. It's totally awesome that it's there. But I don't know. It's starting to bring in a lot of the power and flexibility from panels into layouts. And if you recall, the UI of panels was always catastrophic. And so with complexity and flexibility comes,
complicated
complexity.
interfaces.
Yeah. With flexibility, great flexibility comes great complexity, right?
Yeah.
Can I throw in there real quick on that with the contextual filters? That's something that, or the relationships. I always saw that. I kind of understood them. I watched videos on them, and I never really needed them for my sites. I'd always figure out workarounds because, to be honest with you, it was almost so over the top that I was scared to death of it. And so whatever we can do in that fashion to make it less scary would be highly recommended.
Agreed.
Yeah, this is one of those things that I've used a lot in panels Drupal land, but it was on very complicated sites, and it is sort of a more advanced feature. And any way we can find to make it not daunting for those who don't need it, I would definitely be in favor of. But yeah, this is something that Drupal 8 doesn't have. Like there's no way to do any of this in Drupal 8. So I think it'll put us vastly ahead in terms of like feature completeness. If you use this in Drupal 7.
I actually may be speaking about the wrong thing. There was one piece that I would use the snot out of, and it may be relationships of what we're talking about. But there was another piece where you had to put in a node of like an existing piece of content. That's the one that I'm talking about that always scared me, because it's like,
Like
Okay, I'm gonna-
contextual filters, maybe.
I cannot remember. I know what I'm looking for, and I just go click on it. And I know the other one I just stay away from. So anyway, that's kind of my thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting that adding a context like for a fixed node is something that we already have. Am I making that up? But adding a fixed context is also unusual, but that feature is already there. But adding a relationship, equally unusual. So we now have two options to like add a context that perhaps both of them are kind of like, maybe we should hide both of those links somewhere in the user interface under advanced or
Right.
something, because now there's not just one confusing option, there's two that in
Right.
9 out of 10 situations you won't be using in the first place. So
Yeah, if it's the relationship itself to be able to relate to other entities, then yes, that is super powerful.
yeah, that's
because
what we're
yeah.
Yep, that's what we're adding in
Okay.
this functionality.
It was the fixed, like you said, that you call it the fixed context. That's the one I always kind of stayed away from because it just
Mhm.
I never really needed it and it was kind of scary. So
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, let's get relationships in there. Those are awesome.
Yeah, and the initial pull request only adds one out of box relationship, and that's the
Author.
author from node, which is probably the most common relationship. But because we don't have
Term is pretty common too, because term references in core. So it's pretty common that like you might want the image from a taxonomy term that your node is tagged by. That's a fairly common use case, or any field off of a term that you tagged your node with. So I would recommend us doing that as the second one, not right now, after we get this in. But all of the other ones are dependent on other relationships that aren't in core yet, like reference fields and stuff. And those can come either as part of the contrib module that maybe eventually goes into core, or whenever we start to support those in core.
Yep. All right. Well, that's all we have for 119 at the moment. The normal process for 119 items is that you have something that's in the 119 milestone, and we need a volunteer to say that they will be an advocate for a particular issue. And that is as simple as editing the issue summary, putting advocate : your handle in the issue summary, and that makes it an issue that has an advocate. And then we'll start talking about it during these weekly meetings. It's preferred that an advocate would actually join the meeting and give us the update directly, but it's also appreciated if the advocates could post into Zulip before the meetings or post into the agendas directly, status updates, and then we'll mention them verbally. That's it for 119. We're still like I said at the beginning of this, kind of planning blue sky opportunity time for 119, where we can talk about the features that we'd like to see added in the release 4 months from now. And usually we allocate a meeting or two a couple weeks after the release. So that could be as soon as next week, but we might want to say like February 4th as being the first meeting where we start throwing out ideas, and we'll kind of not have the normal meeting, and we'll just talk about the things that we're excited to see or possibly interested in developing for the next release. Tim, do you have some suggestions? I know you've kind of been our event organizer.
Sure.
If you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about this last week I think when you weren't there in the other meeting, Nate, or in the last couple of weeks, about that whole planning process. And also last year about this time, we did sort of a year end or goal setting for the year meeting. And so I think if we did sort of a brainstorming of new features for 1.18 or 9, we maybe think about it slightly broader and brainstorm like what would we like to see over the course of the next year, of course, some of which could be 1.19. My feeling was that last year we had some really productive meetings and sort of brainstorming. I mean, part of those meetings last year weren't just features. They were just like process, what did we do right last year? What do we want to do better this year? I feel like we had some really good discussions. I think we didn't do a great job at documenting like what the next steps were on a lot of it. So if we want to do something like that this year, I would say we try to like have some sort of blog post or final report at least that summarizes what came out of the discussions. Does anybody else remember those meetings and have any thoughts on whether they were helpful?
I thought they were helpful. I think it would be good for us to have a PMC meeting, at least one PMC meeting like that every year, just to make sure we touch base with everybody and check in on Backdrop as project as a whole. I like the idea of having a list of issues for the PMC to review before we have that meeting, so that we're not just pulling things out of thin air and we have something concrete to look at. And then if we feel like there's something missing from that list, I think it feels like an easier starting point than like, what do we want for Backdrop, which is sometimes a never-ending conversation.
Right. I am a little bit hesitant to bring this up right now, but I might if it's okay. So I mean, what we tend to do is brainstorm lists of possible future ideas. And I know we've talked about before, like doing some kind of a survey to see like actually how popular the different ideas are. And I don't know that there's opposition to the idea of doing that survey. And it's more just like, how would we do it, implement it? And can I share my screen? I was playing around this week and did something. I'm going to try sharing my screen. Where I set up a temporary website for, my thought was it'd just be sort of a temporary thing where people could submit issues and people could vote on them. And it would not be a binding vote. It would just be an informative vote, voluntary. But I sort of have it set up and I put a bunch of the issues that have been brainstormed before as sort of new features. It would require that to people to participate that they log in. I'm using the flag module so that everybody can just sort of flag the ones they think are most popular. And I feel like, I don't know, it might be an interesting one-time experiment to just sort of see what, and you know, even if we only had, in my view, 10 or 15 or 20 people, maybe some of the core members of the most active people in the community do it. I'd love to see what like the most popular issues or new features are. Anybody have any thoughts on something like that?
I think it's a great idea. I've been thinking over the last week or two that having some type of a poll on Backdrop, the backdropcms.org, being able to get in front of the people who are not on the back end channels. They're not in front of they're not in front of Zulip or the meetings, but you know, they are active on the website, a place where people can kind of know that, hey, you know, this is where I can go vote and put my voice out there on what I want to see happen. I think it's a great idea.
I think the idea of surveying users comes up from time to time, and I think it's just an implementation. Like, how do you do that on an ongoing basis that's meaningful? And this idea is limited to like a one-time 2-week thing, where you know we either you know I don't know how broadly we promote it, but the idea is that we just get a snapshot of like during the next 2 weeks, get as much input on what the most popular issues are.
I think I think as opposed to putting. Go ahead, Jen.
I love it. I think we should do this once a year though, rather than just like once,
Sure.
just so we can continue to have like a pulse on it. I'm sorry, I missed the beginning. Does this pull from all of the issues that are tagged, or no, it's just stuff people recommend right through here?
Yeah. So right now, I'm not so great at like APIs. So I manually created nodes for about 20 issues that have been brought. I basically we did an issue about 2 or 3 releases ago. We did what new issues do you want to see in Backdrop CMS? And we had a bunch of people post their favorite issues. And I mostly took these from that. I also added a few more. Basically, anybody there is a submit a feature idea, and you know, you just add the issue number. Oh, the test field shouldn't be there. So you basically just add a title if you want to add some text in an issue number, and it gets added.
Does it have to have an issue, or can you recommend new things?
No, I would say it doesn't have to have an issue. I didn't require this field, but I think where there is an issue, it's really helpful to have a link to it.
Yeah.
And we could clarify that. And when I said one-time thing, I meant, you know, as an experiment. I didn't mean like we absolutely never do it again, but I just meant we're not committing until we've tried it.
Yeah.
To doing it again.
I could see where we could have kind of an ongoing feature request type of deal. But then, you know, maybe one that deals with the overall for the year, another one that's going to deal with the next milestone. And I could see us integrating this with the newsletter where, right now we're talking about 119. And so for a short period of time, hey, here's the issues that we're discussing for 119, vote on them. If you have some ideas for 119, add them. And then the voting process for 119 is going to close on this date, but send that out as a newsletter, before each one of those milestones, just to get in front of the people that aren't normally coming in to check this stuff out. It's kind of like, oh, hey, let's go see what they're thinking about adding. And, oh, yeah, I want to vote on that. And then go about their day. Anyway, integrating in with the newsletter, I think would be beneficial.
This is what a lot of these ideas came from this blog post, which is something we have done in the past, which is or not blog post. This was a forum post. Go ahead, Peter. I'm sorry.
I think Classic Press has a website where they track ongoing feature requests and people can vote on like a certain number of them. And then when something gets marked as fixed, they can go vote on more stuff.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, they do. And we talked about that, I think, during Backdrop Live. Okay. I don't know what the next steps are for this, but and I think Nate has to leave in a few minutes. So.
Yeah, I'd like to talk to you about this more offline to see how we can get it up. I love it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Tim.
I'm going to quit sharing.
Yeah, before we close, let's also go over initiative updates. So telemetry is one initiative that we're moving forward on. Tim, you're the advocate or the lead, excuse me, for the initiative.
Yep, and there's really no new information on this particular initiative the last couple of weeks. Once we decided it wasn't going to go into the last release, I've focused on other things, but we'll now go back to further testing and updating the next steps to get this in the next release for sure. I think we're close enough. We should be able to.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, we'll just keep cruising along here. Theme development should not be necessary to use Backdrop or the Ready to Wear initiative. Luke, can you give us an update?
Sure. We're actually in the final stretches, as I said last week. I've got a terrible looking but functional site put together that kind of does the intent of giving a way to test themes and content and touch on some other interface issues together. I'm working with Tim to kind of put it into sort of a place where people can poke at it, and it's almost it's kind of ready to be poked. I'm going to be looking for design guidance actually, just because I can kind of realize the things that I can do, but I probably shouldn't do them in terms of interface. Anyway, so I actually think I'll be able to kind of put it online and start chattering about it in Zulip today. Should I give him more of a description of Ready to Wear for purpose of viewers, or maybe I'll just point them to the Backdrop forums if you want to find out what I was just talking about.
Yeah, I think the latter would be good. We've got documentation to go over, and I think we've got a bit there.
All right, then I'm out.
So where would they go? The forum site?
There's an initiatives section, and within that area, it's one of the approved initiatives, and they'll be able to read about it there.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, and last up we have documentation, which Peter has been working on this past week and proposed an issue over in the backdropcms.org issue 747. But yeah, I haven't had a whole lot of time to look into this, but I'd love to hear what your thinking is, Peter, and kind of where you're heading.
Yeah, so it came about a while ago. I just made a comment in an issue about maybe we should put all documentation into one place, which is effectively a docs.backdropcms.org site. And this is similar to how other websites do it, like Lando, GitHub, Tugboat, etc. They've all got like docs. Their domain, like a separate subdomain for their documentation site. And the reason I thought of that is because currently we have all documentation like spread out between two sites, the API site and the backdropcms.org site. And even on the backdropcms.org site, it's like separated between the developer section and the user guide and like different places, even in the menu. So it's all like all over the place. And I thought just putting it all into one place where it's easy to find everything, it's all searchable, it's all, you can see it in one place, which means you can see where there might be gaps, so update documentation, and also just for someone to be able to go to one place and just sort of step through like a book page type, just click next, here's the requirements to install Backdrop, here's how you install it, here's how you update, here's how you use the different parts of Backdrop, all that sort of thing, here's how to contribute, all the stuff in one place. So the reason I brought it up today is mainly because of two questions. One is, can this just be an issue that it's in the, I think, backdropcms.org queue, or I can't remember where I put the issue, but it's in one of the queues. Is it just a normal issue that we can just work on, or does this have to be an official, initiative where the PNC has to vote on it? We have to wait till the approved time to start working on it, all that sort of thing. And then secondly, the issue of the domain change, because we're thinking that it would be easiest to repurpose the API site rather than set up a whole brand new website. So because the API site's already got lots of documentation on there, and that can just change from api.backdrop to docs.backdrop. A few URLs, redirections would need to happen, that sort of thing, but that's probably a whole thing that would just need the PNC's approval before we go ahead with that.
Yeah, I think the PMC approval is really only needed for like setting up the domain and deciding what we want to do with their infrastructure. But I don't think that anything needs to be necessarily an initiative to move forward on things. I think just as long as we know which direction we're going, it can be done. But that said, documentation is already an initiative that we've been looking for, like some momentum around that we're just like, we want to improve documentation generally is already an initiative, but we actually haven't been really sure about which way we want to move forward on it. So this brainstorming that you've been putting together and suggestion is super highly appreciated, and looks like it's already garnered a lot of feedback from various people.
We should check with Mark. He was going to be the documentation initiative lead. And just make sure if he wants to be involved, he would have the chance to be, because I don't think he's seen this yet. But he
we
also
can have multiple leads too.
Yeah,
that's totally a thing.
Yeah, I want to make sure we're not working in two separate things without collaborating. That's the only.
Right.
Yeah.
Is this for the documentation? Is this something that's going to be an open edit? Kind of like the way I think Drupal. It seems like they kind of went backwards and closed a lot of that documentation. If I've noticed correctly, but is it going to be kind of an open deal, or are we going to just provide access to the people who say that they're going to commit time to that?
Well, this is what I was thinking. Does it need to be initiative, or does it be just an initial issue? Because my initial idea was just set up the documentation website, in this case, convert API to docs, move our existing documentation from backdropcms.org to the new docs.backdrop website. And then that's my idea effectively done once that happens. Once that's done, we can then use the new docs repository to have an issue queue where people can ask for new documentation, fix documentation, maybe make feature requests for, let's make it more of a moderated status where you can just create documentation, then it goes into a queue where people approve it, then it gets published so anyone can do it. And we can discuss all that stuff there once we have a dedicated website for it. But my initial thing was like, let's just set up the website and move all documentation there. And then after that, we can work out what we want to have with it rather than trying to figure that all out now, basically.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. I do like the moderation queue. That'd be good.
Sorry, we have a number of us that it's now 2 o'clock Pacific that need to drop out. Would you guys like to continue on the recording, or should we pick this back up next week?
I made Tim the host,
Right.
so hopefully, Tim, you can stop the recording when it's done.
Sure.
You have that button.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So if we want to talk about this a few more minutes, we can.
Yeah, please do, and see what you guys think. And if you can write a summary in the issue, that'd be great.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye. I'll just say, Peter, I appreciate the work you're doing. I just, to me, it's such a big issue in terms of like what direction we should go in terms of where to house it and what the workflow is. And there seem to be a lot of opinions out there that, you know, I'm equally convinced either way makes sense. So I'm just right now kind of listening and love to see these questions answered. But I, you know, like I'm not ready to take a position on whether or not combining all the documents on one side is a good idea or not. I just sounds like a good idea, but then, you know, Jen comes back and says, you know, that they would deliberately made the decision not to do that before. And I'm like, well, okay, well, what does that mean? I don't know.
Yeah, to summarize that point so there is an issue for this if people want to look it up. It's in the backdropcms.org repo, and it's issue 747. So in there, I've put in the proposal. I've basically gone through and listed all the documentation at the title of each page of documentation that we have on backdropcms.org and on the API website. I've listed all in there, and then I've, in a separate comment, relisted it in a new proposed re-merged fashion. And my initial thought was to put everything in the one place, and I still believe that's the best idea. But yeah, Jen did bring up the point that apparently there was a reason that they separated the user guide. So here's how to use the admin bar, here's how to create a node, all that sort of thing. That's the user guide, and that was specifically kept separate from other documentation. And so she believes that that would be best kept separate from everything else. So there is that debate whether we put the user guide and everything else on the one site, or whether we keep the user guide on backdropcms.org and everything else on the new documentation site. If it helps get it pushed through, I'm happy to leave the user guide where it is, and then we can revisit that later once we've seen how the new website works. But yeah, I still believe probably everything in one place is better, because it just means you can then have one search box, type in something, and see all the documentation for that topic in the one place rather than going between websites. So that's one thing that needs to be decided. But as I said, we can move forward and just leave it as is, like with the user guide separate. But yeah, that issue 747 on the backdropcms.org repo has all the thoughts and suggestions and stuff where people can make comments or see what's being proposed exactly and stuff like that.
Right. So yeah, to Nate's point about the PMC involvement, like it probably doesn't need to be involved to move forward, but I feel like you're looking for that because, and I would be too, because unless there's real clear, you know, shared direction, you don't want to spend a lot of time on a specific idea if the community's not going to buy into it. And like having the PMC take a position would give you some clarity about, like, yes, it's okay to move in this direction. And
yeah, it's also because there's like, if we do go ahead with it, I mean, I'm not sure how best to do it yet. Whether I clone the API site, put all the documentation there, and then just talk with Justin about getting that updated database onto the server or whatever. But yeah, if there is stuff about updating the server, changing domain names, etc., then I thought no one, even a core committer, can't just go ahead and ask Justin to start doing that without the PMC's approval. Yeah. It needs to be a general backdrop decision to go ahead with that. So that's what I thought, to get to that approval. But I'll see if I can work out a plan of attack, like if this is to go ahead, how best to do that. Because I mean, if I take a copy of the API site, because we want to have that still live and working while this is all happening, it could take a while to move all the documentation over, especially since we're doing it on an existing site. I don't know how it's going to be doing like an automatic migration or something, but if I take a copy of the API site and then on my local or something, just updating its database with all the new stuff and getting it ready to push live, how do we then manage the existing API site getting updates in the meantime with this one happening and all that sort of thing. So I'm not sure on the best approach yet, but I'll maybe put a comment in the issue queue about that, and then people can respond and see what they say.
Okay. So does anybody else have any other questions or comments and documentation, or? No? Is there anything else we should get on the recording before
Just
we
someone
end the
say
meeting?
something about that, or-
Mhm.
What?
I'm just going to throw my 2 cents in there. I think it would be
Okay.
better to have the documentation in one spot, because especially on when I'm using other projects and I have to go to 2 or 3 different places to find things, that's
Mhm.
annoying.
Okay,
Just my personal opinion.
good. Anybody else? Any other issues that you want to get on the record, or should we just wrap this up?
Yeah.
Okay.
So for issue, oh, I had commented a little while ago. It's in a different queue. Wait, let me find it.
Okay. Take your time.
732. There we go. I put it into. So it's for the 7.4 upgrade on the production for PHP.
Sure.
So it looks like it was depending on issue 4777, which has been resolved. So I should have the green light to move forward on it, but I was just wondering if there were any concerns about that with anybody that has special software running on the server.
I'm sorry, this is backdrop cms.org issue queue, right?
Yeah,
And it was issue number
732.
Okay. I mean, I doubt I have any objection. I'm looking at it now. Upgrade PHP. Okay, so the upgrade PHP to 7.4x on the production host. And you're just looking to see if there's any objections to that or any concerns, right?
Yep. Okay.
Peter, you would probably, of the people here, the most likely to know if that's a problem.
So Justin, was there like a test server where you've done this upgrade already and made sure everything works as is, and you're just wanting to push it all up, ready to go live, or?
Well, I've been testing, backdropcms.org on my workstation, and it looks fine. But there's other code that I'm not aware of that runs
right
certain jobs and things. So I was kind of looking to feedback to see if anyone's tested that against 7.4, or if there's any concerns about it before I just go for it.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna guess that nobody has tested it, the custom code, and I think there is a fair amount of custom code in backdropcms.org, isn't there? Again, Peter, you would know.
I think maybe Justin's talking about other code on the server that does other little jobs and stuff.
Okay. Well, that too.
Yeah, I'm not sure what else is on there or how it all works and whatever.
Right.
Probably Nate or Jeff would be more knowledgeable about that.
Well, I'll wait till I get the green light on the issue, issue.
So were you thinking about just going ahead and making this switch, or could you sort of clone the server and do the upgrade and test it that way? Is that too much work?
Well, I don't know if it's that serious or not. I mean, maybe some of those jobs could fail and it's not a disaster.
That's a good point, actually. That's probably the approach I would take if I were I would just pull the trigger and then fix things.
Yeah. So be warned. It's coming. So if you have something special running on there, let me know if I just need to test it. So.
Well, in an unrelated issue, Jen just mentioned to me yesterday that Nate tends to be more conservative when it comes to doing something if he's not sure, whereas she's more just like, let's get it done. However, she breaks more stuff than he does, so it's like,
yeah.
Wait, can I ask a real quick question? So you're wanting to update the PHP version on the server, right?
Yeah, for backdrop.org.
Okay.
And after the upgrade and stuff, I'll go look at the logs and see if there's anything that's failing.
Now, is it the way you got the server set up? Then I mean, are there multiple servers then, or is pretty much all of the backdrop.org sites, are they all housed on the one server?
It's all on the one server. Yeah.
Okay. So have you looked into, I know like with cPanel, they've got ways of being able to choose different versions of PHP based on the website itself. That might be, I don't know if you've got that ability on that server, but that might be something to look into. And then that way you could come in and say, hey, backdrop.org, or backdropcms.org, that's fine. We could go ahead and upgrade that one. But the API site, we need to wait and we need to leave it on the older version. But that might help you down the road with this type of an issue, to where you could come in and, you could go forwards and backwards if you need to, without blanketing the entire thing and then going, oh crap, I broke stuff. It's a thought. I'm just throwing it out there.
Well, sure. Well, I don't want to kind of complicate production like that.
It's right.
I have a like a Docker environment that I can switch around PHP pretty easy.
Okay.
To do testing, but
okay.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I mean, potentially we could have like dev sites for everything, so we can test against it.
I'll shoot over a link. It's on DigitalOcean, and honestly, most of this is pretty much over my head, but I think it might point you in the right direction of what I'm thinking on this. It might be something worth looking into. And I don't know, for me, looking at it, it's way over my head, too complicated. I wouldn't mess with it, but somebody that knows more about Linux, they could probably look at it and go, oh yeah, no, that's a piece of cake. So I'll link it over to you, and you can do what you want with the info. How's that sound?
Sure.
Justin, if you did the upgrade and there were problems, is just rolling back to the old version quickly an option, or?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I think so. Yeah, it can roll it back. But
I think if you're relatively confident, I would endorse just going ahead. But if you want a more official endorsement from Nate and Jen, I get that.
So. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I'll test through all the sites on my workstation again, and there's just some jobs and things that I'm not sure about.
Yeah.
You've tested it and that's mostly working. I'd say just do it, and then if there is just a little job and that's the only problem, everything else works fine, I don't think it's worth reverting just for that. I think we'll just try and fix it there and then.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, it's nice to get Nate and Jen's approval, but on the other hand, they're not the backdrop community is back there.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I'll wait for their approval too.
Well, you could do it now, and if it breaks, you could blame it on Peter and me.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Okay. Sure. I think anything else?
Yeah.
Okay. Why don't we wrap up this meeting? So thanks, everybody. I'm going to cut the live stream. I will keep the room open for a minute if anybody wants to talk a little longer.